The letter had arrived 3 months ago, and Maggie Edwards still could not believe she was standing on the wooden platform in Denver, Colorado territory, in the autumn of 1876, watching her elderly mother lean heavily on her cane beside her while they waited for a man they had never met. The train behind them hissed and groaned, releasing steam into the crisp mountain air, and Maggie felt her stomach twist with a mixture of hope and terror at what lay ahead. She clutched her mother's worn carpetbag in one hand while adjusting her own threadbare bonnet with the other, acutely aware that she was about to meet the cowboy who had responded to her advertisement with words that had seemed too good to be true. Nathan Jameson had written that he needed a wife, someone strong enough to handle ranch life and kind enough to make a house feel like a home. Maggie had replied honestly, explaining that she was 24 years old, capable of hard work, and desperate for a fresh start after losing her father and 2 brothers to illness back in Pennsylvania. What had made her hesitate before sending that letter was the admission she knew might disqualify her immediately. She could not leave her 67-year-old mother behind. Rose Edwards was frail now, her joints swollen with arthritis, her breathing sometimes labored, but she was all the family Maggie had left in the world. When Nathan's response had arrived 2 weeks later, Maggie had opened it with shaking hands, expecting rejection. Instead, she had read 5 words that had changed everything. I have room for family. The platform was crowded with people coming and going, miners in dusty clothes heading into the mountains, families with crying children, businessmen in pressed suits carrying leather cases. Maggie scanned the faces anxiously, looking for someone who matched the description Nathan had provided. He had written that he was 32 years old, tall, with brown hair and a scar along his left jaw from a run-in with a spooked horse years ago. He had promised to be waiting with his wagon, ready to take them to his ranch about 15 miles outside of Denver. "You see him?" Rose asked, her voice thin and worried. The journey had been hard on her, days of rattling train cars and uncomfortable seats, nights spent trying to sleep sitting upright. Her face was pale beneath her gray hair, and Maggie felt a stab of guilt for bringing her mother on this uncertain adventure. "Not yet, Mama," Maggie said, forcing confidence into her voice. "But he will be here. He promised." A man approached then, weaving through the crowd with purpose, and Maggie felt her breath catch. He was indeed tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest and a hat that shaded his face until he was close enough to tip it politely. When he did, Maggie saw the scar he had mentioned, a thin white line that ran from his ear to his chin, but it did nothing to detract from a face that was rugged and honest, with gray-blue eyes that looked at her with curiosity and something that might have been relief. "Miss Edwards?" he asked, his voice deep and gentle. "Yes," Maggie managed, suddenly aware of how travel-worn she must look. "And this is my mother, Rose Edwards." Nathan turned to Rose and removed his hat completely, a gesture of respect that Maggie noticed immediately. "Mrs. Edwards, it is an honor to meet you. I hope the journey was not too difficult." Rose studied him with the sharp eyes of a mother protecting her daughter. "It was long," she said carefully, "but we are grateful to be here, Mr. Jameson." "Nathan, please," he said, then looked back at Maggie. "Both of you just call me Nathan. We are going to be family after all." He said it simply, matter-of-factly, as though it was already decided and there was nothing strange about bringing a mail-order bride and her elderly mother home to his ranch. "My wagon is just over here. Let me take those bags." He reached for their luggage, and Maggie noticed his hands were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who worked hard. As he led them toward the wagon, she found herself studying him more carefully. He walked with confidence but not arrogance, greeting people they passed with friendly nods. The wagon was sturdy and clean, with 2 strong horses hitched and ready. In the back, Maggie saw blankets folded neatly, clearly placed there for their comfort during the ride. Nathan helped Rose up onto the wagon seat first, taking care with her stiff movements, not rushing her. Then he turned to Maggie and offered his hand. When she took it, she felt the warmth of his palm through her thin glove, and their eyes met for a moment that seemed to stretch longer than it should have. His gaze was steady and kind, and Maggie felt something inside her chest that had been tight for months begin to loosen just slightly. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I know it took courage." "Thank you for making room for my mother," Maggie replied, her voice catching slightly. "You did not have to do that." "Family is important," Nathan said simply. "I lost mine years ago. I understand what it means to want to keep the people you love close." He helped her up onto the wagon seat beside her mother, then climbed up himself and took the reins. As they pulled away from the station and into the streets of Denver, Maggie looked around at the bustling town. Buildings lined the dirt roads, some wooden and rough, others more substantial brick structures. Saloons stood next to general stores, and she could hear piano music drifting from one establishment even though it was only mid-afternoon. Cowboys rode past on horseback, and women in practical dresses hurried along the wooden sidewalks. "Denver has grown quite a bit in the last few years," Nathan said, guiding the horses expertly through the traffic. "The mining brings a lot of people. My ranch is far enough out that we do not get much of the noise, but close enough that we can come to town for supplies when needed." "How large is your ranch?" Rose asked, her practical nature asserting itself. "About 300 acres, Nathan replied. "I run cattle mostly, about 200 head right now. I have a hired hand, Tom, who helps with the heavy work. The house is not fancy, but it is solid. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a main room downstairs with a kitchen area and a root cellar. I built a front porch last spring where you can sit and watch the sunset over the mountains." Maggie listened carefully, trying to picture what her new home would look like. Everything she owned was in the 2 bags Nathan had placed in the back of the wagon. She had sold nearly everything else to afford the train tickets, and even then, they had barely had enough. This was not just a new beginning, it was their only option. She glanced at her mother, who was holding herself stiffly against the jostling of the wagon, her lips pressed thin with discomfort, but saying nothing. Rose had been a strong woman once, raising Maggie and her brothers on a small farm while their father worked in the town mill. But the years and the losses had worn her down, and Maggie knew that her mother needed rest and care more than she needed adventure. As they left Denver behind, the landscape opened up before them in a way that took Maggie's breath away. Rolling hills stretched toward distant mountains, their peaks already dusted with early snow. The grass was golden in the autumn light, and the sky seemed impossibly vast and blue. Back in Pennsylvania, the world had felt closed in, hemmed by trees and hills. Here, everything felt open and full of possibility. "It is beautiful," Maggie said softly. Nathan glanced at her, and she saw pleasure in his expression. "It is home," he said. "I came out here 8 years ago with nothing but what I could carry on my horse. Worked on other men's ranches until I had saved enough to buy my own land. It has been hard work, but good work." "You mentioned in your letter that you lost your family," Rose said, her tone gentler now. "May I ask what happened?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. "Fever took my parents and my younger sister when I was 22, back in Kansas. I could not stay in that house alone with all those memories, so I headed west. I thought about getting married over the years, but I was too busy building the ranch, and I suppose I was particular about finding the right person." He looked at Maggie again. "When I decided I was finally ready, I did not want to court some girl in town who might have ideas about changing me or the ranch. I wanted someone who understood what she was getting into, someone who needed this as much as I did." The honesty in his words struck Maggie deeply. So many men would have hidden their reasons or dressed them up in prettier language, but Nathan simply stated the truth. She appreciated that more than he could know. "I will work hard," she said firmly. "I can cook and clean, tend a garden, help with animals. I am not afraid of work." "I can see that," Nathan said, and there was approval in his voice. "Your letters told me plenty about your character, Miss Edwards. The fact that you were honest about your mother instead of trying to hide it until you arrived told me you were someone I could trust." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon creaking rhythmically, the horses' hooves steady on the packed earth road. The sun was beginning to lower toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Maggie felt exhaustion from the long journey beginning to catch up with her, and beside her, Rose had closed her eyes, though Maggie knew she was not sleeping, just resting. "Tell me about the area," Maggie said, wanting to learn everything she could. "Are there neighbors nearby?" "A few," Nathan replied. "The Wilsons have a ranch about 5 miles to the north. Good people, been here longer than I have. They have 3 children, all grown now but still helping with the ranch. To the south is the Turner place, though they mostly keep to themselves. The nearest town besides Denver is Littleton, about 8 miles from my ranch. It is smaller, quieter, with a church, a general store, and a doctor." "A doctor," Rose said, opening her eyes. "That is good to know." Nathan looked at her with understanding. "Dr. Morrison is a decent man." "If you need to see him, Mrs. Edwards, we can arrange that." "Thank you," Rose said softly, and Maggie saw her mother's eyes grow damp. It had been so long since anyone had shown them such consideration, such simple kindness. The road curved and began to climb slightly, following the natural contours of the land. They passed a creek that sparkled in the fading light, and Nathan pointed it out. "That runs through part of my land. The water is clear and cold, comes down from the mountains. Good for drinking, good for the cattle." As the sun touched the mountain peaks, Nathan turned the wagon onto a narrower track, and Maggie saw a fence line beginning, sturdy posts connected by strong wire. "This is the start of the property," Nathan said, and she could hear pride in his voice. They followed the fence for perhaps a quarter mile, and then the house came into view. It was not large, but it was well built, a 2-story structure made of solid logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. The front porch Nathan had mentioned stretched across the front, with 2 rocking chairs placed where one could indeed watch the mountains. Nearby stood a barn, also well constructed, and Maggie could see a chicken coop and what looked like a vegetable garden, now mostly harvested for winter. Smoke rose from the chimney, a welcoming sign that someone had been preparing for their arrival. Nathan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, and immediately the front door opened. A young man emerged, perhaps 25, with sandy hair and a friendly face. "Welcome home, boss," he called. "Everything is ready like you asked." "Thanks, Tom," Nathan said, hopping down from the wagon. "This is Miss Edwards and her mother, Mrs. Edwards. Ladies, this is Tom Parker, my hired hand and the best cowboy in Colorado." Tom blushed at the praise and touched his hat respectfully. "Pleased to meet you both. I got the stove going and there is stew warming. Figured you would be hungry after that long ride." Nathan helped Rose down first, and Maggie noticed how Tom immediately moved to offer support on her other side as they walked slowly toward the house. Nathan returned for Maggie, and as his hands circled her waist to lift her down, She felt that strange flutter in her chest again, a sensation she had not expected to feel with a man she had just met. Inside, the house was simple but clean. The main room had a large stone fireplace with a fire burning cheerfully, filling the space with warmth. A sturdy wooden table with 6 chairs stood in the center, and against one wall was a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, shelves for dishes and provisions, and a deep sink with a pump. Stairs led upward to what must be the bedrooms, and Maggie saw that the floors were wood, swept clean with a few rag rugs placed strategically. "It is not much," Nathan said, suddenly seeming uncertain, "but it is solid and warm." "It is wonderful," Maggie said honestly, looking around at what would be her new home. After the cramped rooms they had rented in Pennsylvania, barely able to afford firewood in winter, this felt like a palace. Rose sank into one of the chairs at the table, and Maggie could see the exhaustion on her face. The journey had taken everything out of her. "Let me show you upstairs," Nathan said. "Tom, would you bring up their bags?" "Sure thing, boss," Tom said, already heading back out to the wagon. Maggie followed Nathan up the stairs, which were steep but solid. At the top was a small landing with 2 doors. Nathan opened the first one. "This was my room," he said. "It is the larger of the 2, and I thought your mother might be more comfortable here. It has the bed and a chair, and the window faces east so she will get morning sun." Maggie looked into the room and saw a double bed with a simple quilt, a wooden chair by the window, and a small table with a lamp. It was spare but clean, and she felt a lump form in her throat at Nathan's thoughtfulness in giving up his own room. "And this one," Nathan said, opening the second door, "I have been using for storage, but I cleared it out and brought up another bed. I thought you might want privacy until we know each other better and you feel comfortable." The second room was smaller, with a single bed, a small dresser, and a hook on the wall for hanging clothes. The window looked out over the front porch toward the mountains, and even in the dimming light, the view was spectacular. "Where will you sleep?" Maggie asked, suddenly realizing she had not thought about the practicalities of this arrangement. "I will make up a place downstairs by the fire," Nathan said. "It will not be the first time I have slept on the floor, and I will be plenty warm." "We cannot turn you out of your own room," Maggie protested. "This is your home." "It is our home now," Nathan said gently. "And I want your mother to be comfortable. She needs rest and recovery after that journey. Please, Miss Edwards, let me do this." Maggie met his eyes and saw only sincerity there. This man, this stranger who had agreed to marry her sight unseen, was showing more consideration and kindness than she had dared to hope for. "Thank you," she said quietly. "And please call me Maggie. If we are to be married, we should at least use our given names." Something warm flickered in Nathan's gray-blue eyes. "Maggie," he said, as if testing how it felt. "And you should call me Nathan, not Mr. Jameson. That makes me feel old." Tom appeared at the top of the stairs with their bags, breaking the moment. Nathan showed him which room was which, and Tom set the bags down accordingly, then excused himself to head back to the bunkhouse near the barn where he lived. "Come down when you are ready," Nathan said. "The stew will be waiting, and I imagine you and your mother are hungry." After he went back downstairs, Maggie helped her mother up to the larger bedroom. Rose sank onto the bed with a sigh of relief. "He seems like a good man," she said softly. "He does," Maggie agreed, helping her mother remove her boots. "Better than I hoped for, honestly." "You do not have to go through with this if you have doubts," Rose said, taking Maggie's hand. "We can find another way." Maggie squeezed her mother's hand. "There is no other way, Mama. We both know that, but I do not have doubts. Not about this. Nathan is kind and honest, and he has already shown us more generosity than we had any right to expect." Rose nodded slowly. Then perhaps God was watching over us after all. They went downstairs to find Nathan ladling thick stew into bowls at the table. He had also sliced bread and set out butter and jam. It was simple fare, but it smelled wonderful, and Maggie realized she could not remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. They sat together at the table and Nathan bowed his head. "We normally say grace," he said, "if you do not mind." "Of course," Maggie said, bowing her own head. Nathan's prayer was short and sincere, thanking God for safe travels, for new beginnings, and for bringing family together. When he said amen, Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. It had been so long since she had felt part of a family, since she had sat at a table with people who cared. The stew was delicious, thick with beef and vegetables, and the bread was fresh. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and then Nathan asked about their journey, about Pennsylvania, about what Maggie's life had been like before. She found herself talking more freely than she had expected, telling him about her father's work at the mill, about her brothers who had both dreamed of going west before the fever took them, about the little house where she had grown up. Nathan listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. He told them more about ranch life, about the cattle and the horses, about the challenges of Colorado winters and the beauty of spring in the mountains. Rose added her own questions, practical things about water and supplies and what the winters were really like, and Nathan answered everything honestly. When the meal was finished, Maggie insisted on cleaning up, but Nathan helped, showing her where things were kept, how the pump at the sink worked. They worked side by side in the lamplight, and Maggie found the domestic routine surprisingly comfortable. Rose had dozed off in her chair by the fire, and Nathan lifted her gently and carried her upstairs to bed, helping Maggie settle her mother under the quilts. When they came back downstairs, the evening had fully settled in. Through the windows, Maggie could see stars beginning to appear in the vast western sky. "I should let you rest," Nathan said. "You must be exhausted from the journey." "I am tired," Maggie admitted. "But I also feel like I should say something, like we should discuss the arrangements." Nathan nodded and gestured to the chairs by the fire. They sat, and Maggie noticed he left a respectful distance between them. "What is on your mind?" he asked. "You have been so kind," Maggie began, "and I want you to know I understand the nature of our arrangement. You need a wife, someone to help with the household and make this place a home. I need security and a home for my mother and myself, but I also want to be honest with you. I barely know you, and while I am grateful, I also feel nervous about what happens next." Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his expression serious. "Maggie, I am going to be plain with you because I think we will do better with honesty between us. I did need a wife, that is true. This ranch is lonely, and I wanted someone to share it with, but I am not a man who believes in forcing anything. We will get married, yes, because that is what we agreed, but everything else can happen in its own time. I will not pressure you for anything you are not ready to give." The relief that flooded through Maggie was palpable. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know that is not what most men would say." "Maybe not," Nathan said, "but I want more than just a housekeeper or someone to warm my bed. I want a partner, someone I can build a life with. That takes time and trust, and I am willing to wait for both." They sat in the firelight, and Maggie felt something shift between them, something that felt like the beginning of real understanding. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why did you say yes when I told you about my mother? Most men would have refused immediately." Nathan was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Because I know what it is like to lose everyone you love," he said finally. "And I know what it is like to wish you had been able to keep them close, to take care of them. When you wrote that you could not leave your mother behind, It did not make me want to refuse you. It made me respect you. It told me you were loyal and loving, and those are qualities I value more than almost anything else." Maggie felt tears spill over, running down her cheeks. Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently wiped the tears with his thumb. "We are going to be fine," he said softly. "All three of us. I know it feels uncertain right now, but I promise you, Maggie, I will take care of you and your mother. You have my word." In that moment, sitting in the firelight with this kind, honest man, Maggie felt the first real spark of hope she had known in years. Maybe even the first flutter of something more. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised Maggie with its naturalness. She woke early each morning to help Nathan prepare breakfast before he went out to work the ranch. Rose would wake later, moving slowly as her joints loosened, and Maggie would help her dress and settle her by the fire or, on warmer afternoons, on the front porch where she could watch the mountains. Nathan had been true to his word about sleeping downstairs, making himself a pallet by the fire each night. Every morning he would fold the blankets neatly and stow them away before Maggie came down, as if to save her any awkwardness. She had offered several times to take the smaller bedroom upstairs and let him have his privacy, but he always refused gently, saying she needed her own space. Tom came to the house for meals, and Maggie quickly learned that while Nathan was quiet and thoughtful, Tom was chatty and full of stories. He had come west from Missouri 3 years ago, running from a father who drank too much and hit too hard. Nathan had taken him on when he was half-starved and desperate, and Tom's loyalty to his boss was absolute and obvious. "Never met a fairer man," Tom told Maggie one afternoon when Nathan was out checking fence lines. "He treats me like a partner, not just hired help. Taught me everything I know about ranching, about horses, about being a decent man." Maggie had been kneading bread dough at the kitchen table, and she looked up at the young cowboy with interest. "He seems to be very fair," she agreed. "More than fair," Tom said earnestly. "Last winter, when I got sick with that cough that would not quit, Nathan brought me into the house and nursed me himself for 2 weeks. Said he was not going to let me die in that cold bunkhouse. Most bosses would have just hired someone new." These stories about Nathan's character were piling up, and each one made Maggie's heart soften a little more toward her husband-to-be. They had not yet discussed when the actual wedding would take place, and Maggie had not pushed the subject. She could tell Nathan was giving her time to adjust, to feel comfortable, and she appreciated his patience more than she could say. A week after their arrival, Nathan suggested a ride around the property so Maggie could see the full extent of the ranch. Rose encouraged her to go, saying she would be fine resting on the porch with the quilt Nathan had brought down for her. Tom agreed to stay close to the house in case Rose needed anything. Nathan saddled 2 horses, a gentle mare named Daisy for Maggie and his own gelding, a strong bay named Duke. It had been years since Maggie had ridden, but the skill came back quickly, and soon they were moving across the golden grassland at an easy pace. "The cattle are in the north pasture right now," Nathan explained as they rode. "We will move them closer to the barn as winter comes on, but for now they have good grazing up there." He pointed toward rolling hills in the distance. "Beyond those hills is Wilson property. Robert Wilson and I help each other out during branding and roundup. It is too much work for one man and one hired hand." "What is Mrs. Wilson like?" Maggie asked, curious about her neighbors. "Martha Wilson is a force of nature," Nathan said with a smile. "Raised 3 children out here, runs her household like a general runs an army, but she has a good heart. She will probably come calling soon to meet you and your mother. She likes to know everything that happens within 20 miles. They rode in silence for a while, and Maggie found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse, enjoying the vastness of the landscape. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sage and grass, and overhead, a hawk circled lazily on thermal currents. "Do you miss Pennsylvania?" Nathan asked. Maggie considered the question. "I miss what it used to be," she said finally. "I miss my father and my brothers. I miss the life we had before everything fell apart. But the place itself? No. There were too many sad memories by the end. This feels like a place where new memories can be made." Nathan turned to look at her, and there was something warm in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "I hope you will be happy here, Maggie. I know it is different from what you are used to, and I know life on a ranch can be hard, but I will do everything I can to make this a good home for you." "You already have," Maggie said softly. "Nathan, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you have done. Taking in my mother, being so patient with me, treating us with such respect. You could have demanded things, insisted on your rights as my husband, but you have not. That means more to me than I can express." They had stopped their horses on a rise that looked out over much of the ranch. Nathan dismounted and came to help Maggie down, his hand steady on her waist. When her feet touched the ground, he did not immediately step back, and they stood close, looking at each other. "Maggie," he said quietly, "I want you to understand something. Yes, we agreed to marry, and yes, we both had practical reasons for making that choice. But from the moment I read your first letter, something about your words touched me. You wrote about duty and hard work, but you also wrote about hope and family and wanting to build something good. That is what I want too. Not just a practical arrangement, but something real." Maggie felt her breath catch. "Something real," she repeated. "I know it is too soon for talk of feelings," Nathan continued, "but I want you to know that I see you, not just as a solution to loneliness or a pair of hands to help with work. I see you as a woman with courage and strength, and I find myself hoping that in time, we might build something more than just a practical arrangement." Without fully intending to, Maggie reached up and touched the scar on Nathan's jaw, tracing it lightly with her fingers. "How did you really get this?" she asked. Nathan's lips curved in a slight smile. "I told you, a spooked horse." "I know that is what you wrote in your letter," Maggie said, "but there is more to the story. I can see it in your eyes when you mention it." Nathan caught her hand gently, holding it against his face for a moment before lowering it, though he did not let go. "You are perceptive," he said. "The horse spooked because a rattlesnake struck at it. The horse bucked me off and I landed badly, hit a rock. Could have been killed, but I was lucky. Only got this scar and a concussion that had me seeing double for a week." "That must have been terrifying," Maggie said. "It taught me to be more careful," Nathan replied. "And it taught me that life is fragile. We do not know how much time we have, so we should not waste it on things that do not matter." They were still standing close, still holding hands, and Maggie felt her heart beating faster. She had not expected this, had not expected to feel drawn to Nathan so quickly. But there was something about his quiet strength, his gentle kindness, that called to something deep inside her. "I think we should set a date," she said suddenly. "For the wedding." Nathan looked surprised. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel rushed." "I am certain," Maggie said. "We are going to do this anyway, and I think waiting will just make us both more nervous. Besides, it does not feel right, you sleeping on the floor, everything in this state of uncertainty. Let us make it official, and then we can figure out the rest as we go." A slow smile spread across Nathan's face, transforming his usually serious expression. "All right then. When?" "Next Sunday," Maggie suggested. "That gives us a week to prepare, to invite your neighbors. It does not need to be elaborate, just something simple and honest like us." "Like us," Nathan echoed, and then he did something that surprised them both. He leaned down and kissed her forehead softly, a gesture that was tender and respectful and full of promise. "Next Sunday, then. I will ride to town tomorrow and arrange for the preacher to come out." They rode back to the house in a comfortable silence, but Maggie felt as though something important had shifted between them. The decision had been made, and now they would move forward together, not just as strangers bound by a practical arrangement, but as two people choosing to build a life together. Rose was delighted when they told her about the wedding plans. "A week will give me time to help make something nice for the meal afterward," she said, already planning despite her limitations. "And you will need a proper dress, Maggie." "I have my Sunday dress," Maggie said. "It will be fine." But Nathan surprised her the next day when he returned from town with a package. Inside was a length of beautiful cream-colored fabric, simple but lovely. "Mrs. Chen at the general store said this would be suitable for a wedding dress," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "She also gave me the name of a seamstress in town who could make it up quickly if you would like." Maggie held the fabric to her cheek, feeling the soft cotton. "It is beautiful," she whispered, "but Nathan, you did not have to do this." "I wanted to," he said simply. "You should have something nice for our wedding day." Rose insisted that she was well enough to do the sewing herself, and over the next few days, Maggie would find her mother carefully stitching in the good light by the front window, creating a simple but elegant dress with a fitted bodice and a full skirt. It was the kind of dress Maggie could wear again for church or special occasions, but on her wedding day, it would be special. Nathan had invited the Wilsons and a few other neighboring families, as well as Tom and the preacher from Littleton. It would be a small gathering, but that suited Maggie perfectly. She had never wanted a large, showy wedding. She wanted something meaningful, and that was what this would be. The day before the wedding, Martha Wilson arrived in a wagon with her daughter, Sarah, who was 19, and engaged to a young rancher from north of Denver. Martha was indeed a force of nature, a tall, sturdy woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes that took in everything. But her voice was warm when she greeted Maggie on the front porch. "So you are the brave woman who answered Nathan's advertisement," Martha said, clasping Maggie's hands firmly. "I am glad he found someone. That man has been alone too long." "Thank you for coming," Maggie said. "And for bringing your daughter." Sarah was shy but friendly, and she and Maggie quickly found common ground in discussing the practical realities of ranch life. The Wilson women had brought food for the wedding meal, including a beautiful cake that Martha had baked that morning. "I know what it is like to try to put together a wedding with no time and no help," Martha said firmly. "No new bride should have to cook for her own wedding dinner." Rose came out onto the porch, moving slowly, and Martha immediately adjusted her booming energy, greeting Maggie's mother with gentle respect. "Mrs. Edwards, I am so pleased to meet you. You raised a good daughter." "Thank you," Rose said, settling into one of the rocking chairs. "I am grateful to you for welcoming us to the area." "Neighbors help neighbors out here," Martha said. "That is how we survive. And you should know that if you need anything at all, you just send word. We are only 5 miles away." The women spent the afternoon together, and Maggie found herself feeling more at ease than she had in weeks. Martha told stories about the early days of her ranch, about raising children on the frontier, about the challenges and joys of the life Maggie was about to fully enter. Sarah shared her own excitement about her upcoming marriage, and Maggie realized she was making friends, building a community. This would truly be home. That night, after the Wilsons had left and Rose had gone to bed, Maggie and Nathan sat on the front porch in the rocking chairs, looking at the stars. Tomorrow they would be married, and the thought filled Maggie with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. "Are you afraid?" Nathan asked quietly. "A little," Maggie admitted. Not of you, but of the unknown of whether I can be a good wife, whether I can handle everything that ranch life requires. You are already handling it, Nathan said. You have been here less than 2 weeks and you have made this house feel like a home. You care for your mother, you work hard, you ask good questions. You are going to be fine, Maggie, better than fine. What about you? Maggie asked. Are you afraid? Nathan considered this. I am afraid I will not be good enough, he said honestly. I am afraid I will disappoint you somehow, that you will regret coming here. Maggie reached across the space between their chairs and found his hand in the darkness. I do not think you could disappoint me, Nathan Jameson. You have already exceeded every hope I had. His fingers tightened around hers, warm and strong. They sat in silence, holding hands beneath the stars, and Maggie felt peace settle over her like a blanket. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the autumn sky a brilliant blue with just a few white clouds drifting past. Maggie woke early and found Nathan already outside doing the morning chores. She prepared breakfast for herself and her mother, then went upstairs to help Rose dress for the occasion. You are making the right choice, Rose said as Maggie brushed her mother's hair and pinned it up. Nathan is a good man and he will take care of you. I know, Mama, Maggie said softly. I can see that. But more than that, Rose continued, meeting her daughter's eyes in the small mirror they had propped on the dresser, I think you could be happy with him. I see the way you look at each other. There is something there, something real growing. Maggie felt her cheeks warm. It is too early to know what it is, she said. But yes, I feel something. He is not what I expected. The best things in life rarely are, Rose said wisely. Sarah Wilson arrived mid-morning to help Maggie prepare, bringing flowers she had gathered from the last of the autumn blooms. Together, they arranged Maggie's dark hair, pinning it up with a few curls left to frame her face. The cream-colored dress fit perfectly, and when Maggie looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked happy, she realized with some surprise. Despite everything, despite all the uncertainty and fear of the past months, she looked genuinely happy. The preacher, Reverend Miller, arrived at noon, a kindly older man with a gray beard who had been ministering to the scattered ranches around Littleton for 15 years. The Wilson family came in their wagon, dressed in their Sunday best. Tom had put on a clean shirt and combed his hair, looking nervous and excited. A few other neighbors arrived, people Maggie had not yet met but who greeted her warmly. Nathan was waiting on the front porch, and when Maggie stepped out with her mother and Sarah, his expression made her breath catch. He looked at her as though she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and whatever nervousness Maggie had been feeling melted away. Nathan wore a clean white shirt and a vest, his hair neatly combed, his boots polished. He walked forward to meet them, offering his arm to Rose first and helping her down the porch steps, ensuring she was comfortably settled in a chair that had been placed in the front yard where the ceremony would take place. Then he returned for Maggie, and when she placed her hand on his arm, he covered it with his own. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "So do you," Maggie replied, and he laughed, a warm sound that eased the last of her nervousness. They stood before Reverend Miller in the autumn sunshine, surrounded by the handful of people who would become their community. Rose watched from her chair, tears streaming down her face. Martha Wilson beamed like a proud mother. Tom stood to Nathan's side as his best man, and Sarah stood beside Maggie, holding the small bouquet of autumn flowers. Reverend Miller spoke about marriage, about partnership and commitment, about building a life together based on respect and love. He read scripture about Ruth and Naomi, about loyalty and family, and Maggie felt the words resonate in her heart. When it came time for the vows, Nathan took both her hands in his and spoke clearly. I, Nathan Jameson, take you, Maggie Edwards, to be my wife. I promise to provide for you, to protect you, to honor you, and to work every day to be worthy of the trust you have placed in me. I promise to care for your mother as my own, to make our house a home, and to be your partner in all things. This I vow before God and these witnesses. Maggie felt tears spill over as she spoke her own vows. I, Maggie Edwards, take you, Nathan Jameson, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you, to work with you, to build a life with you. I promise to honor your trust, to make our house a home, and to be your partner in all things. This I vow before God and these witnesses. Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, and Nathan leaned down to kiss Maggie gently, respectfully, but with a warmth that sent a shiver through her. When they turned to face their guests, everyone was smiling, and Tom let out a whoop that made everyone laugh. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of celebration. Martha and Sarah had set up tables outside with the food they had brought, supplemented by dishes from the other neighbors. There was roasted chicken and fresh bread, vegetables from late gardens, pies and cakes. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was music and dancing on the grass in front of the house. Nathan danced with Maggie first, holding her carefully, guiding her through steps she half remembered from years ago. Then he danced with Rose, moving slowly so she could manage despite her stiff joints, and Maggie saw her mother smile more genuinely than she had in months. Tom danced with Sarah, both of them laughing when they stumbled over each other's feet. As the sun began to set, casting golden light over the mountains, the guests began to depart. Martha hugged Maggie fiercely and whispered, "Be happy, dear girl. You deserve it." The other neighbors offered their congratulations and invitations to visit, promises to help if it was ever needed. Finally, it was just the three of them again, Nathan, Maggie, and Rose plus Tom, who excused himself quickly to head to the bunkhouse, giving the newlyweds their privacy. Rose kissed both Maggie and Nathan on the cheek and made her way slowly upstairs, leaving them alone. The house felt very quiet after all the noise and activity of the day. Nathan and Maggie stood in the main room, suddenly awkward with each other now that the reality of being married had settled in. Nathan cleared his throat. "It was a good day," he said. "It was a wonderful day," Maggie agreed. "Thank you for making it so special." "Maggie," Nathan said, and something in his tone made her look up at him. "I meant what I said in my vows, all of it, and I want you to know that tonight, well, we do not have to change anything. I can still sleep down here. We can take our time." Maggie had been thinking about this all day, thinking about what she wanted, about what felt right. She crossed the room to where Nathan stood and took his hands. "I think we have taken enough time," she said quietly. "We are married now, really married, and while I am still nervous, I am also sure. Sure about you, about us, about this choice." Nathan's eyes searched hers. "Are you certain?" "I am certain," Maggie said. "I want to be your wife in all ways, Nathan. I want to start our life together properly." Nathan reached up and cupped her face gently. "Then come upstairs with me," he said softly. "Let me show you how much I already care for you." Maggie's heart was pounding as they climbed the stairs together. Nathan led her to the larger bedroom, the one that had been his and then Rose's and was now theirs. Rose had moved to the smaller room, insisting that the married couple should have the bigger space. Someone, probably Tom, had brought Maggie's things across during the celebration. In the lamplight, Nathan was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure Maggie felt comfortable and cherished. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until she relaxed in his arms. What followed was tender and sweet, and afterward Maggie lay in Nathan's arms feeling more at peace than she had in years. This man, her husband, had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, and she felt the first real stirrings of love beginning to bloom in her heart. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. "I am more than all right," Maggie whispered. "I am happy." Nathan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Good," he said simply, "because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Maggie dreamed of the future they would build together. The weeks following the wedding brought new routines and rhythms to the household. Maggie woke each morning in Nathan's arms, still marveling at how natural it felt to be his wife. They would rise early and work together to prepare breakfast, moving around the kitchen in an increasingly comfortable dance. Nathan would head out to work the ranch with Tom, and Maggie would spend her days caring for the house, tending the chickens, helping Rose with small tasks, and preparing meals. Rose's health had actually improved somewhat since arriving at the ranch. The clean air and regular meals were doing her good, and while she would never be strong again, she had more energy than she had possessed in Pennsylvania. She would sit on the front porch in good weather, knitting or mending while watching the mountains, and Maggie would join her when she could, the two of them talking or simply enjoying the companionable silence. One afternoon in late October, about a month after the wedding, Maggie was in the barn gathering eggs when she heard horses approaching. She emerged to see a group of riders, 5 men wearing badges, and her heart seized with sudden fear. Lawmen showing up at a ranch usually meant trouble. Nathan and Tom were in the north pasture, too far away to hear, so Maggie squared her shoulders and walked out to meet the riders. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The lead rider, a man with a thick mustache and hard eyes, touched his hat. "Mrs. Jameson, I presume?" "I am Marshall Davis from Denver. We are tracking some cattle rustlers, and we need to check your husband's herd." Maggie felt relief wash through her. They were not here for Nathan. They were just doing their jobs. "My husband is in the north pasture," she said. "I can ride out and get him, or you can head that way. It is about a mile, past that stand of cottonwoods." "We will find him," the marshal said. "But maybe you could answer a few questions first. Have you noticed any strange riders on your property recently? Any cattle missing?" "I would not know if cattle were missing," Maggie admitted. "I am fairly new here, but I have not seen any strangers around. It is usually just my husband, our hired hand Tom, and occasionally our neighbors, the Wilsons." The marshal nodded, making notes in a small book. "These rustlers are working their way through the area, hitting smaller ranches. They are smart, only taking a few head at a time so it might not be noticed right away. We think there are at least 4 of them, maybe more." At that moment, Nathan came riding up fast, having apparently spotted the group from a distance. He dismounted quickly and positioned himself slightly in front of Maggie, a protective gesture she noticed and appreciated. "Marshal," he said, his voice calm but wary, "what is this about?" The marshal explained about the rustlers, and Nathan's expression grew serious. "I have not noticed any cattle missing, but I have not done a full count recently. Tom and I can ride the property this afternoon and see if anything looks off." "We would appreciate that," Marshal Davis said. "If you find anything suspicious, send word to Denver immediately. These men are dangerous. They have shot at people who have tried to stop them." After the lawman rode off toward the north pasture to check the herd, Nathan turned to Maggie. "Are you all right? Did they frighten you?" "A little," Maggie admitted. "When I saw badges, I did not know what to think." Nathan pulled her close, right there in the yard. "I am sorry you had to face that alone. From now on, if anyone comes to the ranch when I am out in the pastures, you send Tom or ring the bell." "I put that bell on the porch post for a reason." "I handled it fine," Maggie said, but she leaned into his embrace, enjoying the solid warmth of him. "I know you did," Nathan said. "You are strong, Maggie, but you do not have to be strong alone anymore. We are partners, remember." That afternoon, Nathan and Tom did a careful count of the cattle and found that 3 head were indeed missing, taken sometime in the past week. Nathan rode to Denver the next day to report it to the marshal, and when he returned, his expression was grim. "The rustlers hit 2 other ranches this week," he told Maggie over supper. "Took more cattle, and at the Turner place they shot Mr. Turner when he tried to stop them. He will live, but it was close." Rose, who had been quiet during the meal, spoke up. "Are we in danger here?" Nathan met her eyes honestly. "There is always some danger on the frontier, Mrs. Edwards, but I want you both to understand that I will protect this family. I have a rifle and I know how to use it. Tom does too, and I sent word to the Wilsons to let them know what is happening. We will all watch out for each other." That night, Maggie lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the wind in the eaves, the distant call of a coyote. Nathan was asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even, and she studied his face in the moonlight coming through the window. This man had become so important to her so quickly. The thought of anything happening to him made her chest tight with fear. As if sensing her distress, Nathan stirred and opened his eyes. "What is wrong?" he asked sleepily. "Just thinking," Maggie whispered. "About the rustlers, about danger, about how quickly life can change." Nathan pulled her closer. "Life can change quickly," he agreed. "I learned that when fever took my family. But Maggie, we cannot live in fear of what might happen. We can only be smart and careful and trust that God will see us through." "I am afraid of losing you," Maggie admitted. "I know we have only been married a month, but you have become so important to me. If something happened to you, I do not know what I would do." Nathan rolled to face her fully, propping himself on one elbow. "Nothing is going to happen to me," he said firmly. "But Maggie, I need you to hear this. If somehow something did happen, you would be provided for. This ranch is in both our names now. The deed is in the strong box under our bed. You would own it, and you could run it with Tom's help, or you could sell it. Either way, you and your mother would not be destitute." "I do not want the ranch," Maggie said, tears spilling over. "I want you." Nathan kissed her then deeply, pouring emotion into it. "And you have me," he said when they finally broke apart. "For as long as God gives us. I love you, Maggie Jameson. I did not expect to fall in love so quickly, but I have. You have made my life complete in a way I never thought possible." Maggie felt as though her heart might burst. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you the moment you helped my mother off that wagon and treated her with such kindness." They made love then, with a new intensity born of the knowledge of how precious their time together was, how quickly everything could change. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Maggie felt the fear recede. Whatever came, they would face it together. The rustlers were caught 2 weeks later in a dramatic confrontation north of Denver. One was killed, the others captured, and the stolen cattle were returned to their rightful owners. The recovery of Nathan's 3 head was a small part of the overall operation, but Nathan was relieved nonetheless. The threat was over, and life could return to its normal rhythms. As November arrived and the weather turned colder, preparations for winter became the primary focus. Nathan and Tom worked long days repairing the barn roof, chopping firewood, moving the cattle to pastures closer to the ranch buildings. Maggie spent her days preserving the last vegetables from the garden, making sure the root cellar was well stocked, sewing warmer clothes and quilts. One morning, Maggie woke feeling queasy, and by mid-morning she had been sick twice. She tried to hide it from Nathan, not wanting to worry him, but Rose noticed immediately. "How long has this been happening?" her mother asked quietly when Nathan was outside. 3 days, Maggie admitted. I thought maybe I ate something bad, but I am starting to wonder if it might be something else. Rose's face broke into a wide smile. Oh, my dear girl, I think you might be carrying your first child. The possibility had occurred to Maggie, but hearing her mother say it aloud made it feel suddenly real. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, wonder filling her. Do you really think so? I know so, Rose said with the confidence of a woman who had been through it herself. I recognize the signs. We should ride to Littleton and see Dr. Morrison to be sure, but I would wager everything I own that you are going to be a mother. Maggie did not tell Nathan right away, wanting to be certain before she shared the news. The next day, she asked him to take her to Littleton, saying she needed to purchase some supplies for winter sewing. Nathan hitched up the wagon, and Rose came along for the journey, all of them bundled against the November cold. In Littleton, Maggie visited Dr. Morrison while Nathan went to the general store and Rose waited in the warm doctor's office. Dr. Morrison confirmed what Rose had suspected. Maggie was indeed pregnant, probably about 6 or 7 weeks along, which meant the baby would arrive sometime in early June. You are healthy and strong, the doctor said kindly. I see no reason why you should not have a perfectly normal pregnancy and delivery. Just take care of yourself, eat well, rest when you need to. Maggie could barely contain her excitement as they made the journey back to the ranch. Nathan kept giving her curious looks, clearly noticing that she seemed unusually happy, but he did not press. When they arrived home and Nathan went to unhitch the wagon, Rose kissed Maggie's cheek and said, "Tell him tonight. He deserves to know he is going to be a father." That evening, after supper was cleared away and Rose had retired upstairs, Maggie sat with Nathan by the fire, trying to find the right words. Nathan noticed her nervousness and set aside the harness he had been repairing. "What is on your mind?" he asked gently. "You have been acting strange since we got back from town." Maggie took a deep breath. "I went to see Dr. Morrison today. That was the real reason I wanted to go to Littleton." Nathan's expression immediately became concerned. "Are you all right? Are you sick?" "I am not sick," Maggie said quickly. "At least not really. Nathan, I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." Nathan stared at her for a long moment, his expression stunned, and then a slow smile spread across his face, growing wider and wider until he was grinning like a boy. "A baby," he repeated. "Really? Really," Maggie confirmed, laughing at his expression. "Dr. Morrison says I am about 6 weeks along. The baby should come in early June." Nathan let out a whoop that probably woke Rose upstairs, then pulled Maggie into his arms, holding her tightly but carefully, as if she might break. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby. Maggie, this is incredible. This is wonderful. I am going to be a father. Are you happy?" Maggie asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said. He placed a hand gently on her stomach. "A baby, our baby, a family." "We are already a family," Maggie said. "With you and me and Mama, but yes, now we will be a growing family." That night, Nathan was almost comically careful with her, treating her as though she might shatter at any moment. Maggie had to laugh and remind him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. But his protectiveness was endearing, another sign of how much he cared. The winter months passed slowly, each one bringing new changes to Maggie's body and new preparations for the baby's arrival. Nathan was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying that Maggie was doing too much, lifting too much, working too hard. Maggie alternated between being touched by his concern and exasperated by it. Rose was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, and she spent many hours knitting tiny blankets and sewing small gowns. Martha Wilson visited regularly, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes from her own children and grandchildren. The women's friendship had deepened over the months, and Maggie was grateful for Martha's practical wisdom about pregnancy and childbirth. Christmas came, and Nathan surprised Maggie by bringing home a small pine tree that they decorated with strings of popcorn and dried cranberries. It was the first real Christmas celebration Maggie had enjoyed in years, with Nathan, Rose, Tom, and the Wilson family all gathering at the ranch for a feast and gift exchange. Nathan gave Maggie a beautiful wooden cradle he had made in secret in the barn, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Maggie cried happy tears at the thought of her baby sleeping in something made by his father's hands. As January turned to February, and then March, the winter seemed endless, with snow covering the ground and temperatures that sometimes dropped below zero. But inside the ranch house, Maggie felt warm and loved and happy. Her belly grew round with the baby, and Nathan would spend evenings with his hand on her stomach, marveling at every kick and movement. Spring finally arrived in April, bringing warmer temperatures and the first green shoots pushing through the thawing ground. Maggie's back ached constantly now, and she tired easily, but her spirits were high. Just 2 more months until she would meet her baby. One morning in early May, Tom came running to the house with news. "There is a wagon coming up the road," he said. "Looks like maybe a family." "Should I ride out and see what they want?" Nathan was already reaching for his hat. "I will go with you. Maggie, stay inside with your mother." But Maggie, curious, stood on the porch watching as Nathan and Tom rode out to meet the approaching wagon. To everyone's surprise, the wagon contained a young couple, probably in their early 20s, with 2 small children. The man drove while the woman held a baby, and another child, perhaps 3 years old, sat in the back. Nathan brought them up to the house, and the man introduced himself as James Edwards, saying they were looking for a Rose Edwards, that he had heard she might be in this area. Maggie felt her heart skip a beat at the name Edwards. Rose came out onto the porch, leaning on her cane, and stared at the young man. "James," she whispered. "James Edwards, Aunt Rose," the young man said, climbing down from the wagon. "I cannot believe we found you. We have been searching for months." It turned out that James was the son of Rose's youngest brother, a nephew Rose had not seen in over 10 years. He had been living in Missouri but had recently decided to move west, and before leaving, he had tried to find his aunt and cousin, only to discover they had left Pennsylvania months earlier. Through a series of letters and inquiries, he had finally traced them to Nathan's ranch. "But why come all this way?" Rose asked, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her nephew. "Because you are family," James said simply. "And because I wanted my children to know their great aunt and their cousin." He looked at Maggie. "You must be Maggie. I remember you as a little girl." The reunion was joyful and overwhelming. Nathan, ever practical and generous, immediately offered James and his family a place to stay while they figured out their next steps. "We have room," he said, "and family is always welcome." Over the next few days, as James and his wife Emma settled in, stories were exchanged and connections renewed. James was a carpenter by trade and had saved enough money to purchase land and start fresh somewhere new. Nathan suggested he look at the property adjacent to the ranch, which was available for purchase at a reasonable price. "If you bought that land," Nathan said, "we would be neighbors. We could help each other out like the Wilsons and I do, and your children would grow up with cousins nearby." James and Emma were enthusiastic about the idea, and within a week, they had ridden to Denver and made arrangements to purchase the adjacent property. It would take time to build a house, but Nathan offered to let them stay in the barn loft, which they had converted into a comfortable temporary living space, until their own home was ready. Rose was transformed by the arrival of her nephew and his family. Having young children around brought her joy and purpose, and she spent hours telling them stories and teaching them songs. Maggie was thrilled to have more family nearby and excited that her child would grow up with cousins. On a warm June morning, 3 weeks before her baby was due, Maggie woke with a strange cramping sensation. At first, she thought it was nothing, just the normal discomforts of late pregnancy, but as the morning progressed, the cramps became more regular and intense. Rose recognized immediately what was happening. "The baby is coming," she said calmly. "Maggie, do not panic. Babies come when they are ready. Nathan, ride to Littleton and fetch Dr. Morrison. Tom, go get Martha Wilson. Emma, help me get Maggie comfortable." The house became a flurry of activity. Nathan rode off at a gallop, his face pale with worry. Tom headed toward the Wilson ranch. Emma and Rose helped Maggie upstairs to the bedroom, helping her change into a comfortable nightgown and settling her in bed. The labor was long and difficult, as first labors often are. Dr. Morrison arrived and took charge, calm and competent. Martha came and added her experience and encouragement. Nathan paced downstairs, going out of his mind with worry every time he heard Maggie cry out. James tried to distract him, but nothing could calm Nathan's fear for his wife. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Maggie gave one final push, and suddenly the room was filled with the strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Dr. Morrison held up a squirming infant and announced, "You have a son, Mrs. Jameson. A fine, healthy son." Maggie collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and overwhelmed and happier than she had ever been. The baby was placed in her arms, and she stared down at the tiny, perfect face, marveling that she and Nathan had created this life. Nathan burst into the room moments later, unable to stay away any longer. When he saw Maggie holding the baby, his eyes filled with tears. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Everyone is perfect," Dr. Morrison said with a smile. "You have a healthy wife and a healthy son. Congratulations, Mr. Jameson." Nathan approached the bed slowly as if afraid to break the spell. Maggie smiled up at him, exhausted but radiant. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby in Maggie's arms. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Maggie, he is absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Maggie asked, and Nathan nodded mutely. She carefully transferred the baby to his father's arms, and Nathan held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he said, looking at Maggie with such love in his eyes that it took her breath away. "Thank you for coming here, for taking a chance on me, for giving me this family. You have made me the happiest man alive." "What should we name him?" Maggie asked. They had discussed names over the past months but had not settled on anything definite. Nathan looked down at his son, considering. "What about Daniel?" he suggested. "Daniel Thomas Jameson, after both our fathers." Maggie knew that Nathan's father had been named Daniel and her own father had been Thomas. "That is perfect," she said softly. "Daniel Thomas Jameson, welcome to the world, little one." Rose came in to meet her grandson, weeping happy tears. Martha congratulated them both, and Emma brought up food, knowing Maggie would need to eat to recover her strength. Gradually, everyone left to give the new parents privacy, and Nathan and Maggie sat together in the golden evening light, holding their son and marveling at the miracle of him. "A year ago," Nathan said quietly, "I was alone in this house, lonely and wondering if I would ever have a family again. And now look at us. A wife I love more than I thought possible, a son, your mother thriving downstairs, cousins nearby. This house is full of life and love." "I was desperate and afraid a year ago," Maggie replied, "wondering how I would take care of my mother, how we would survive. And you saved us, Nathan. You gave us a home and a family and love." "We saved each other," Nathan said, leaning over to kiss her gently. "We built this together, you and I." Little Daniel made a small sound, and both parents looked down at him, their hearts overflowing with love and hope for the future. The summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless joy. Daniel was a healthy, hungry baby who kept Maggie busy around the clock. Nathan was besotted with his son, spending every spare moment holding him, talking to him, showing him around the ranch as if the infant could understand. Rose doted on her grandson, and her health continued to improve with the joy of having family around. James and Emma's children loved visiting the ranch to see the baby, and Emma and Maggie grew close, supporting each other through the challenges of motherhood. By August, James had completed a small but sturdy house on his new property, and he and Emma moved their family there, though they continued to visit regularly. The two families helped each other with work, shared meals, and their children played together, creating the kind of close-knit community that thrived on the frontier. In September, when Daniel was 3 months old, the Wilsons held a harvest celebration, and families from all the neighboring ranches gathered. It was Maggie's first real social event since the baby's birth, and she enjoyed reconnecting with neighbors and making new friends. People admired Daniel and congratulated Nathan and Maggie on their fine son. As autumn arrived again, marking a full year since Maggie and Rose had first arrived in Denver, the ranch was preparing for another winter. But this time, Maggie felt no anxiety about the coming cold months. She had a home she loved, a husband who cherished her, a mother whose health had improved, extended family nearby, good neighbors, and a beautiful son. Her life was full and rich in ways she had never imagined possible when she had written that first letter to a stranger looking for a mail-order bride. One evening in late October, after Daniel had been put to bed and Rose had retired upstairs, Nathan and Maggie sat on the front porch in their rocking chairs, wrapped in blankets against the chill, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Coming here, marrying a stranger, taking such a huge risk?" Maggie turned to look at her husband, this man who had become everything to her. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I am supposed to be, with you, with our family, building this life together. You gave me hope when I had none, Nathan. You gave me love when I thought I would never have it. How could I possibly regret that?" Nathan reached across and took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I love you, Maggie Jameson, more every day." "And I love you," Maggie replied. "Thank you for saying you had room for family. Thank you for choosing us." "Thank you for choosing me," Nathan countered. "For seeing past the advertisement to the man behind it, for giving me a chance." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they heard Daniel begin to fuss, and Maggie started to rise, but Nathan gently pushed her back down. "I will get him," he said. "You rest." Maggie watched her husband disappear into the house and listened to his voice as he spoke softly to their son, calming him. A few minutes later, Nathan emerged with Daniel in his arms, the baby settling against his father's chest. "He just wanted company," Nathan said, settling back into his rocking chair with Daniel. "I think he heard our voices and wanted to be part of it." Maggie looked at her husband holding their son, both of them silhouetted against the lamplight from inside, and felt her heart swell with love so intense it was almost painful. This was happiness, she realized. Real, genuine, hard-won happiness. The months continued to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. A harsh winter tested them all, with blizzards that lasted days and temperatures that froze everything solid. But the ranch house was warm and well-stocked, and the family inside thrived. Nathan taught Maggie how to track the cattle, how to read the weather signs, how to handle a rifle for protection. Maggie taught Nathan how to make his mother's recipes, how to sing the old songs from her childhood, how to be patient with a fussy baby. Daniel grew and changed, reaching new milestones that delighted his parents and grandmother. His first smile, his first laugh, his first attempts to roll over. Every moment felt precious, worth celebrating. In the spring, when Daniel was nearly a year old, Maggie realized she was pregnant again. This time, she was not nervous about telling Nathan. She waited until they were alone on the porch one evening, watching Daniel toddle around the yard under his father's watchful eye. "We are going to need a bigger house," she said casually. Nathan looked at her, puzzled. "Why is that?" "Because our family is growing again," Maggie said with a smile. "Another baby will arrive around Thanksgiving." Nathan's whoop of joy scared a flock of birds from a nearby tree, and he swept Maggie up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed. "Another baby," he exclaimed. "Maggie, this is wonderful. You are not worried about having two so close together?" Maggie asked, worried. "No, excited, absolutely, happy, more than I can say." Nathan set her down gently and knelt to where Daniel was playing in the grass. "Did you hear that, son? You are going to be a big brother." Daniel, who was just beginning to understand words, smiled and clapped his hands, not really understanding but responding to his father's happy tone. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and this time Maggie knew what to expect. She was more confident, more comfortable in her body and her role as a mother. Nathan was still protective but less anxious, trusting that everything would be fine. In late November, just before Thanksgiving as predicted, Maggie went into labor again. This time, the labor was shorter, only 6 hours from start to finish. Dr. Morrison arrived in time to deliver a healthy baby girl with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the whole ranch. "A daughter," Nathan said wonderingly, holding the tiny girl with the same awe he had shown with Daniel. "We have a daughter, Maggie." They named her Clara Rose Jameson, after Nathan's late sister and Maggie's mother. Rose wept happy tears when they told her, honored to have her granddaughter carry her name. Daniel, now 14 months old, was initially uncertain about the new baby but soon became fascinated with his little sister, wanting to help with everything, bringing her toys, singing to her in his baby way. Watching their children together filled Maggie and Nathan with joy. The ranch continued to prosper. Nathan's herd grew, and he was able to hire another hand to help Tom with the increased work. James's ranch next door was also doing well, and the two families remained close, their children growing up together like siblings. Rose's health remained stable, though she moved more slowly each year. She spent her days in her rocking chair, knitting endless blankets and scarves, reading to the grandchildren, presiding over the household with quiet contentment. She told Maggie more than once that these years on the ranch, surrounded by family, had been the happiest of her life. As Daniel and Clara grew, the house rang with their laughter and occasional tears, with the sounds of play and learning and childhood. Maggie and Nathan added a room to the house, expanding it to accommodate their growing family. They talked about having more children, and Maggie hoped for at least one more, maybe two. The years passed in the rhythm of ranch life: spring brandings, summer growth, autumn harvests, winter preparations. Birthdays and holidays were celebrated with neighbors and family. Hardships came: a severe drought one summer, a rough winter that cost them some cattle, Nathan's broken leg from a riding accident that kept him laid up for weeks. But through everything, the family remained strong, held together by love and commitment and the bonds they had built. Daniel started school in Littleton when he was 6, riding into town with his father 3 days a week. He was bright and curious, already reading beyond his years. Clara was more adventurous, fearless in a way that both delighted and terrified her parents. She loved the ranch, the animals, wanted to do everything her father and Tom did. In the summer when Daniel was 7 and Clara was 6, Maggie discovered she was pregnant again. This baby arrived the following spring, another son they named William Nathan Jameson. Daniel and Clara were old enough now to be real helpers, and they took their roles as older siblings seriously, always wanting to hold William, to help care for him. Rose lived to see this third grandchild born, but her health began to fail in earnest that year. She was 80 years old, and her body was simply wearing out. As autumn arrived, she took to her bed, growing weaker each day despite the doctor's best efforts. One crisp October evening, with the mountains brilliant with autumn colors visible through her window, Rose called Maggie to her bedside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice thin but clear. Maggie sat beside her mother, holding her hand. "What is it, Mama? I am so proud of you," Rose said. "Of the woman you became, of the life you built, of the mother you are. Coming here, marrying Nathan, it was the right choice. I have watched you grow from a frightened girl into a confident woman, and it has been the greatest joy of my later years." "Mama," Maggie said, tears streaming down her face, "please do not talk like this." "Hush now," Rose said gently. "I am 80 years old and I have lived a full life. I have seen my grandchildren born and watched them grow. I have been loved and cared for in my final years. I could not ask for more." She squeezed Maggie's hand weakly. "Promise me you will keep this family strong, that you will remember how much you all mean to each other." "I promise," Maggie whispered. Rose smiled and closed her eyes. "Good. Now send Nathan in. I want to thank him for taking such good care of my girl." Nathan sat with Rose for nearly an hour, and while Maggie never knew exactly what passed between them, Nathan emerged with red eyes and a heavy heart. 2 days later, Rose Edwards passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the family who loved her. They buried her on a hillside on the ranch, a spot with a view of the mountains Rose had loved. The whole community came to the funeral, and Reverend Miller spoke about a life well lived, about family and love and the legacy we leave behind. Daniel, Clara, and little William stood with their parents, learning about loss and grief and the importance of honoring those we love in the days following Rose's death. Maggie grieved deeply, but she also felt grateful. Her mother had lived her final years in comfort and happiness, surrounded by family, and that was more than many people could say. Nathan held her through the hard nights, reminded her of the good memories, helped her find joy again in their children and their life. Life continued, as it always does. The children grew older, each developing their own personalities and interests. Daniel proved to be a natural rancher, like his father, already showing skill with horses and cattle. Clara, true to her adventurous nature, announced at age 9 that she wanted to be a doctor, inspired by Dr. Morrison's visits to the ranch. William was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love for books and learning that reminded Maggie of her own father. Nathan and Maggie celebrated 10 years of marriage, then 15. Their ranch was one of the most successful in the area, built on hard work and smart management. They had hired more help as the operation grew, but Nathan never forgot his roots, always treating his hands fairly and remembering what it was like to be the hired man. When Daniel was 17, tall and strong and looking so much like his father that it sometimes took Maggie's breath away, he started courting Sarah Wilson's youngest daughter, Emily. The families were delighted at the prospect of joining the ranches through marriage. Nathan gave Daniel advice about courting, about respecting women, about what it meant to be a good husband, lessons learned from his own marriage. Clara, at 15, was still determined to be a doctor. Against the social conventions of the time that suggested women should only be teachers or nurses, Nathan and Maggie supported their daughter's dream. They found a female doctor in Denver who agreed to mentor Clara, and twice a month, Nathan would drive Clara to the city for lessons, sitting proudly in the waiting room while his daughter learned about medicine and healing. William, at 12, had already declared his intention to be a teacher, wanting to bring education to the frontier children who often had limited access to schooling. Nathan and Maggie encouraged all their children's dreams, having learned that success came in many forms. James and Emma's family thrived on the adjacent property. Their oldest son eventually married and took over the ranch when James and Emma decided to move into Littleton, wanting an easier life as they aged. The connection between the two families remained strong, the cousins as close as siblings. Martha Wilson, now in her 70s but still formidable, remained a close friend and trusted advisor. She loved to tell people that she had known from the beginning that Nathan and Maggie would make a good match, conveniently forgetting that she had initially been skeptical of a mail-order bride. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Maggie by taking her back to Denver, to the very platform where they had first met. It was now 1896, and Denver had grown into a proper city, but the train station was still there, though much expanded and modernized. "I wanted to bring you here," Nathan said, holding her hand as they stood on the platform, "to remind us both of where we started. 20 years ago, you stepped off that train with your mother, brave and scared and desperate, and you changed my life completely." "You changed mine too," Maggie said, looking up at her husband. He was 52 now, his hair touched with gray, lines around his eyes from years of sun and wind, but still the man she loved with all her heart. "You gave me everything I have, Nathan. A home, a family, security, and most importantly, love. We gave each other those things," Nathan said. "That is what partnership means, what marriage means, building something together that neither of us could have built alone." They spent the night in a fine hotel, a luxury neither of them indulged in often, and the next day they shopped in the city stores, buying gifts for their children and supplies for the ranch. That evening, before heading home, they visited the grave of Rose Edwards, which they had moved to a Denver cemetery at Maggie's request, several years after her death. Maggie placed flowers on her mother's grave and told her about the grandchildren, about the great-grandchildren who would come someday, about the life that continued to flourish. As they drove home in their modern buggy, pulled by 2 fine horses, Maggie reflected on how much had changed in 20 years. Colorado was now a state, having achieved statehood in 1876, the very year she arrived. The wild frontier she had come to was becoming more settled, more civilized. There were schools and churches, telegraph lines and better roads. The ranch had grown from 300 acres to over 1,000, supporting a large herd and providing well for their family. But some things had not changed. The mountains were still beautiful, still majestic. The land was still challenging, still demanding, but also still rewarding for those willing to work hard. And Nathan was still the kind, honest, hard-working man she had fallen in love with, now with 20 years of shared memories and experiences binding them together even more strongly. Daniel married Emily Wilson in the spring of 1898, in a wedding that brought the whole community together. Maggie watched her oldest son pledge his life to the young woman he loved, and saw in his eyes the same commitment she had seen in Nathan's eyes at their own wedding. 2 years later, Daniel and Emily gave Maggie and Nathan their first grandchild, a boy they named Nathan Robert. And Maggie understood for the first time how her own mother must have felt, watching the generations continue, the family growing and branching. Clara achieved her dream of becoming a doctor, one of the first female physicians in Colorado. She set up practice in Denver but made regular trips back to the ranch, never forgetting her roots or her family. She eventually married a fellow doctor, and together they established a clinic that served the poor and underserved, carrying on the values of compassion and service that Nathan and Maggie had instilled. William became a teacher as planned, establishing a school in a small community west of Denver. He married a woman who shared his passion for education, and together they made a difference in the lives of countless children, giving them opportunities they otherwise might never have had. Nathan and Maggie grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced the challenges of aging aches and pains, slower movements, the gradual decline that comes to everyone, but they faced them together, supporting each other as they always had. On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, neighbors, and friends at a celebration on the ranch, Nathan stood to give a toast. 30 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his years, I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride. I thought I needed someone to cook and clean, someone to help with the ranch work, someone to ease the loneliness. What I got was so much more than that. I got a partner who has walked beside me through every challenge and triumph. I got a woman who brought joy and love back into my life. I got a family because she refused to leave her mother behind, and I said I had room for family. He paused, his eyes finding Maggie's across the crowd. Maggie Edwards Jameson, you are the answer to prayers I did not know how to pray. You gave me children who have made me proud every single day. You built this ranch into a home, this house into a heart. You loved me when I was hard to love, stood by me through hard times, celebrated with me in good times. I thank God every day that you stepped off that train in Denver and took a chance on a lonely cowboy. There was not a dry eye in the gathering as Maggie stood and made her way to her husband's side. She took his hand, looking out at all the faces of the people they loved, the life they had built together. When I answered Nathan's advertisement, Maggie said, I was desperate and afraid. I thought I was entering into a practical arrangement, nothing more. But from the very first moment, when Nathan helped my mother off that wagon and treated her with such kindness and respect, I knew I had found something rare and precious. Nathan, you gave me not just security and a home, but love and partnership and a family that has been my greatest blessing. These 30 years have been the best of my life, and if I had it to do over again, I would make the same choice in a heartbeat. They kissed, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered, and then the celebration continued with food and music and dancing under the Colorado stars. Years continued to pass. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Nathan taught his grandsons to ride and rope, the skills he had learned and perfected over decades. Maggie taught her granddaughters to cook and sew, but also to read and think and pursue their dreams, whatever those might be. The ranch passed to Daniel when Nathan and Maggie decided they were ready to step back from the daily work. But they did not leave. They moved into a smaller house that Daniel and Tom built on the property, a comfortable place with a front porch where they could watch the sunset and rock their great-grandchildren to sleep. On a warm evening in the summer of 1912, Maggie and Nathan sat on that porch, celebrating 36 years of marriage. They were in their 70s now, their hands wrinkled and spotted with age, their movements slow but still steady. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of family Daniel and Emily's children playing with Tom's grandchildren, Clara visiting from Denver with her family, William and his wife preparing supper. "You ever wish things had been different?" Maggie asked, a question she had never asked before. Nathan turned to look at her, this woman who had been his companion through the best years of his life. "Not for a single moment," he said. "Every joy, every challenge, every day with you has been exactly what I needed, exactly what I wanted. You were the answer to everything I was searching for, Maggie. You still are." Maggie leaned against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him that had been her comfort for so many years. "I love you, Nathan Jameson," she said softly. "Thank you for saying you had room for family." "I will always have room for you," Nathan replied, kissing the top of her head. "Always and forever." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Nathan and Maggie Jameson sat together in peace and contentment, surrounded by the family they had built, the life they had created, the love that had sustained them through everything. The mail-order bride and the cowboy who had taken a chance on each other had built something that would last for generations, a legacy of love and family and home that would endure long after they were gone. Their story had begun with risk and hope, with desperation and faith, and it had become a testament to the power of love, commitment, and choosing to build something beautiful together. It was a story that would be told and retold in their family for generations to come, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of courage and kindness, and that saying yes to family in all its forms was always the right choice.